The Square Ball Podcast.
Hello to you. Welcome to the show. The West Stand is our new show. It's out on a Monday and a Friday. We are back to the usual output now. Happy New Year to you. The show is available on YouTube. You can find it in your podcast app as well. Guests from across the world of Leeds United. My name's Dan Moylan. With me is Michael Normanson.
You all right?
I'm all right. You all right?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
New year, new you.
Quite similar, I would say, so far.
Did you enjoy watching? How did you watch the game at the weekend, by the way? Did you enjoy that?
I can't remember, was it Berlin or...
Yes.
Yeah, where else is in Germany? Munich, somewhere.
Do you know what? I will open NordVPN on my laptop right now and tell you we were in Germany. Do you want to know the IP address that we were at?
Don't get into full detail.
Too much detail. NordVPN bring you this show. It means you can watch sporting events, stream sporting events from different locations around the world, or if you need to have a different virtual location like we did at the weekend in order to watch LUTV, then you can hop across to Germany virtually anyway. Helps you protect your private data as well, such as bank details. You know, if you're on like public Wi-Fi, things like that. All good stuff.
Works on your phone, works on Fire Sticks, laptops.
Up to 10 devices at once with a NordVPN account, which is great. And I was already a paying customer of it, so I can fully endorse them. If you want to get our exclusive discount with NordVPN, head to nordvpn.com/TSB. 4 months additional, free on top of your discounted 2-year plan there. Risk-free. Why is that, Michael?
Because of the 30-day money-back guarantee.
That's absolutely correct.
Good. I thought that was the case.
nordvpn.com/TSB. You will also find the link to that in the episode description box as well. Time to welcome our guest now then from LUTV, former Sky Sports reporter as well. It's Bryn Law. Hello, Bryn.
Thank you. Hello.
We've given you the curveball one.
Thanks, guys.
By getting you in. Happy New Year, by the way.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you. And let's hope that 2025 is an absolute belter, eh?
Well, Christmas 2024 was going quite well. And then we got into the new year and dropped late points against Blackburn and then dropped late points against Hull. You were there to witness it. And I suppose the entry point here is asking you what Daniel Farke was like in the post-match, because you do that for LUTV, yourself and Mr. Dorigo. What was the mood like?
Well, it was only me for the post-match.
Oh, was it?
On after the game on. I've completely lost track of days here, but it was Saturday, I think, wasn't it, if I recall? Because we'd actually gone off air because Daniel wasn't out with us in time. The guys in the studio chatting through stuff, and they kind of ran out of stuff to say. So at that point, we generally would go off air. So we'd gone off air by the time Daniel arrived. So in a sense, when we do it with Tony involved, the interaction with Tony is when we're doing it live, as we usually do it. But we weren't live for this one. So Tony dipped out.
But we're speaking to him later this week, so we'll ask him about his cowardice.
Yeah. It was a very much a, do I need to get involved with this? Not really. Oh, good. And off he kind of...
I mean, that does beg the question of what can you say under the circumstances, because we found when we did the match ball over the weekend, there is nothing in your mind, let alone something you can say, other than what is MESLIER doing there. And I suppose that's going to be transmitted to the dressing room as well. You saw the reaction of the players. There's a video doing the rounds on Twitter at the minute of the players all just looking absolutely furious. The angle from behind the goal, Road on screaming at MESLIER. Some really confused looking faces in there as well. But,
even Joel Pirro's angry, and he seems like a very calm guy.
Yeah. So did you get an air of that then in the post-match?
Well, no, not really, no, because that isn't... Well, sometimes it's the environment, but I've been in that environment many, many, many times, obviously like thousands of times, that post-match environment when things are at their height in terms of, emotions, adrenaline pumping, all those kinds of things. So the one thing I'd say at the outset is that Daniel Farke is very good at kind of controlling that aspect. I'd say it's good because when I'm doing, as we've discussed in these shows before, when I'm doing the coach education stuff, one of the major things we talk about is post-match interviews and the challenge they present, because you're coming straight off the thing that is the pinnacle of your week's work as a manager or coach, and you are now, at the highest state of emotion you're going to be because it's just after it.
Are you talking there about him delivering a discussion in the dressing room, perhaps, or just the post-match fallout?
What happens in the dressing room is out of no significance to me.
No, I mean in terms of his emotional state. He's coming off the back of having been in that environment.
Everything he's got to as a coach, he has to compartmentalize that bit. This is what we discuss in coach education, right? Now, people may say there are different ways of going about this, but he compartmentalizes this so that there's a dressing room message perhaps, but very soon afterwards, because he's got to come out quickly because he's got, that there's a time scale to these things. He's got to come out and do stuff within a certain time scale. So it took a bit longer on the weekend from a technical perspective because we were like the sole broadcasters on there was no Sky involvement there on Saturday. So, but he's still, he's going to come out relatively swiftly to you. So within 15 or 20 minutes of the final whistle, we'd expect to see him. So he goes and does whatever he does. I don't know. I presume he goes into the dressing room. So he goes into the dressing room. Most of the group of players are going to be in the dressing room. Occasionally, some of them are off doing TV interviews elsewhere. But he's got the group of players in there. Now, I don't know what he does. Whether he addresses them then or not, I don't know. But we see the Daniel that comes out post whatever happens in the immediate aftermath. I mean, the very immediate aftermath of the game. And by the time he arrives at us, the expectation will be that he is now thinking about what he's going to say now. And that's something that we discuss at length on these coach education courses. It's that period, that period between the final whistle going and I'm going to meet the media now. What am I going to say? So I talk with the guys on the courses about message delivery. You formulate a message and that's the thing that you want to get across. That's the thing you want to say. And you're strategizing it on the basis that I know that I'm going to get asked a question about X, Y, and Z. So in this instance, let's face it, Daniel walks out to come and see us knowing that he's going to get a question about Illan Meslier and his performance. Now, it would be an absolute certainty if he goes and does Popey with Radio Leeds, whoever else, TalkSport, whoever else is in the tunnel waiting to speak to him after the match, I'll guarantee he's coming to talk to us, and we are slightly different from them because we are internal. We are part of the organisation. And so he's coming to talk to fellow employees effectively, albeit only on a match day, but I guess that's what we are. And the product is the club's product. So the scenario is a little bit different when he's coming to do the LUTV interview than if he's going to do the BBC Radio Leeds interview, for instance. But I'm guessing he would approach both with the same mindset. From my perspective, I have to weigh up what I'm going to do with this because I am aware that I'm talking to almost a fellow employee, albeit a member of the senior management team, effectively. I mean, if you're thinking about your own workplace, right, You guys won't remember this because it's such a while since you had a proper job. But if you think about your own workplace, something goes wrong, and you are then invited to quiz a member of the senior management team as to why that thing went wrong. But not only that, all the customers of the company are going to be invited to sort of come and listen effectively, because that's effectively the kind of the scenario here, right? So it's a slightly strange set of circumstances that we have. So I have to weigh up here what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do this. And so, you do what you do. And I've done lots of these. I've been in the situation, even when I was working for Sky Sports, for instance, I'm there in the role of neutrality at Sky Sports. I'm just there to ask questions. I don't have any allegiance to either side. So the expectation then quite clearly is that I go and ask the tricky questions, and often it's about a manager's future and he's under pressure and are you going to get the sack, that kind of thing.
Oh, what the fuck was your goalkeeper thinking? That kind of thing.
Well, yeah, if there's a major error happened in the game or a big controversial decision, whatever it might be, then I am obviously expected to go in and ask that question. Now, it isn't still, even in the neutral role, so when I was at Sky Sports, it isn't always necessarily entirely straightforward. And I could, if we had time, we haven't, go into examples of that, where I was in that tunnel post-match with that kind of thing, but it wasn't actually that straightforward because whatever... there's always other stuff going on, right? And so you have to weigh it all up. It's quite difficult in a sense. People say, no, it's not. It's dead easy. Just go and ask the questions. But you have to weigh it all up and you have to work out not only what am I going to ask, but how am I going to ask it. So with Daniel, on Saturday, I had that process to go through. So you do the match reaction, which is like the where we started off, to gauge where he's at, probably to see what his, what his mood is at this stage. And he may give clues and insight into things that he's prepared to discuss immediately, which I can then pick up on to talk about at greater length thereafter. But there was an elephant in the room at the end of the game on Saturday. So the old trick for journalists, for budding reporters, if any of those are listening to this, is to save the hardest question till last, because by then you've already got your material in the can, kind of thing. And if it all goes tits up, to use a phrase, then you've got an interview. And if he's going to storm off in a fit of great anger or call you names or whatever, well, at least you've still got the interview. So I did I adopted that strategy in this instance, and it was the thing we talked about at the end. So I did ask the question, but there have been a couple of other instances this season where people have perceived that there are questions I should have asked, and they say that I haven't, and they let me know about it. Of course they do nowadays. It comes to you via social media in no uncertain terms in a couple of instances. So I'm aware of that. I know that. I see it. I read it. Occasionally react to it. But so the question was asked, and Daniel answered the question. Actually, in terms of the relationship, that's all. That's it. That's all I require as a reporter. I need to be able to ask the question, and he answers the question, and we've both done our bit to an extent there. We don't have limitless time to go talking on and delve deeper and deeper into this thing. And also remember, there are lots of other people there to ask him questions as well. It's not just us. And there are people there who do have probably, who are going to ask more questions about a single subject, if you like. In this instance, it would be that single subject would be Alain Meslier. And what happens is, in the media conference situation, is one person will ask a question about it, and then the next person will pick up on that, and then the next person will pick up. So he would end up answering maybe 6 questions on the Meslier subject, but not all asked by the same person. So that each person...
Is it like teasing details out, I suppose?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. Yeah. So that's that in the room full of people, then that's where you probably would expect to get the real grilling, frankly, because the circumstances are different for the rest of us. So anyway, listen, to cut a long and probably quite dull story short, the question was asked, he answered the question, and Daniel's answers, as I'm sure you're aware, are pretty detailed usually. That his answers are long. He's not one of those managers who goes in for kind of pithy, short and sweet, boom boom. He will explain things. So he gave an explanation. For a manager, it's difficult. He said right at the outset, "I'm not going to call my player out now." So I know at that point that there isn't going to be anything particularly kind of earth-shattering in a way coming out of this. That he is set up to protect his player, which is standard manager mode, frankly. Very, very occasionally you'll see something different, but standard manager mode is to protect your players. And he said he was going to do that. He said he wasn't going to call his player out.
Yeah, you say it's boring though, Bryn, but I think actually it's good to get a little insight into that dance, because as you've said, people will let you know if they think you've not asked a tough enough question. And like you say, you are slightly more compromised, is not the right word, but it's the only one that springs to mind with your position as working for Leeds United as a freelancer. He's the coach, the manager of Leeds United. Then there's the press pack, which are, as you say, neutral, but they get it as well. And you've been in that press pack also. They get it as well. Why are you not going in there and saying, when are you going to drop this piece of shit? That kind of thing. It's like, and I think people need to understand that can't happen, I suppose, because
I'll give you
there's an ongoing relationship that needs to be preserved.
And actually, let's not forget, there's another person in this relationship, and that guy's called Alain Meslier.
Yeah.
So we see Alain every week. We did an interview with him post-derby when he played his 200th game, kept a clean sheet, Leeds had won. Happy days. That's only, what is that? Is that a week ago even?
Yeah.
Not very long ago. So things change. But we see Alain, we see the people that we talk about. In many instances with journalists, they have the opportunity, used to see this a lot in kind of Premier League environment, whereby they can walk into a situation they can kind of chuck a hand grenade in, and then they can walk out the room.
Jose Mourinho.
Well, any of those guys, they can go in. The reporter can go in, ask his tough questions, and leave, knowing that he won't be back again next week, and the week after that, and the week after that, and the week after that, knowing that he won't encounter any of the people he's talking about face to face in any situation. And if you are not in that situation, if you are going back repeatedly to see people, you do have to establish a relationship here, and there is a trust element to that, which is a two-sided, two-way exercise. So I get on well, I think, with Daniel, but I have to work a little bit at that. I do have to work at that to make sure that remains the case. I mean, it was easy with Marcelo Bielsa because I never, ever interviewed him, ever. So that was actually the most straightforward manager club reporter interview ever created, because there was no interaction whatsoever. You didn't know who I was. So but that's unique. That isn't usually the case. Every other instance we've had since has been that attempt to establish a little bit of a rapport here, because you're going to be seeing the person week in. And we need that person to come and talk to us. And we need Ilan, if Ilan is the player designated to do the next pre-match interview, we need him to come and do that. Listen, we're kind of hypotheticals, but so that element is also a factor in all of this as well. So we're all human, and we are trying to all muddle along together, kind of thing, in the best possible way. And it's not, football makes it difficult from time to time, and Saturday made it difficult because the circumstances are such that you think you're getting one thing and then something completely different happens. And as a fan, you feel you can clearly identify what caused that to be the case. So you want to get right to the nub. If you look at, I usually watch those little 3-minute highlight packages that the club put out on YouTube. They're 3 minutes because I think that's the stipulated duration for them. I haven't watched this. I haven't watched the whole one because I didn't want to. And I do look at the comments though, right? So people out there, if you post comments on there.
Oh, I don't read the comments.
Well, I know, but sometimes I think you actually got to go through an exercise of actually gauging what people are saying about it, because I'm not working in a bubble here.
Yeah.
I live in the city for a start. So it is interesting to see what people say. From time to time, they say nice things. In other occasions, they say not so nice things about me. Mostly, they don't talk about me at all, which is actually really good if they don't. But it was clear from the amount of, so you get different amounts of traffic depending on different games. So a 0-0 draw, if you look at the numbers, everybody looks at the numbers now. If you analyze the data for a 0-0 is kind of low numbers and low comments, low interaction. But then if you look at the numbers for the YouTube stuff on Saturday, not just the short highlights package, which is always the most popular one, but also the Daniel Farke interview, you'll see the comments number is very high. And that, so that tells you that people are invested in this thing, and there's a reason for that. And I think actually that's absolutely, that's fine. That's as it should be, that they are more, people tend to be more invested when they're angry. We all know that. More likely to pass a comment when they're angry than when they're really happy with the way everything's going. So you can see from the numbers that people were. So what that does, again, I'm being a bit long-winded here, but what that does, that's the vindication, if that's the right word, or the justification for me asking the manager a question about the big issue, in this case, the MESLIER mistake in that post-match interview, because that is what has drawn the engagement. So quite clearly, I think you would, you'd extrapolate from that's what people had come to see. And if they've come to LUTV to see that, and then we have, there is an element of us doing what we should do there. We should do that. Of course, we should do that. We should be able to ask that question. There's no doubt about that. There might be ways we go about it, but we should be able to ask that question. And we did. And manager responded, and and people can pick over the bones of that and decide what they decide.
I suppose there's an interesting moment when Daniel Farke is walking down the tunnel towards you, and maybe does a little nugget of gold occasionally happen in that space between him approaching and you going into journalist and reporter and manager interview mode, where you perhaps just get a little peek behind the curtain?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's barely a peek, frankly, because he's always very friendly, Daniel. He's, I always look forward to seeing him after a game. Even I look forward to seeing him less after a game where it hasn't gone well, but there haven't been many of those.
Yeah.
That cannot make this point often if there have not been many of those. So it is unusual and even on Saturday, it's not as it should have been, but it wasn't a defeat, it was a draw, right? Circumstances are different. The draw, materializes in a different way, then it's reflecting on point away from home and all that sort of stuff. So it's the manner of the circumstances that led us to that place. So Daniel is good. I tried to say this earlier on. I think one of his strengths for me, from the way he presents himself, is his consistency of appearance is steady. If I'm talking to coaches, I think we always discuss how the best place to be is on a straight line, so that you aren't like wildly joyful after a
and
a narrow
Postacoglu,
win.
you're describing how he's gone from being jolly best mate to looking like he's about to smack someone in every interview.
Yeah, well, here's it. You see, this is what happens. People will watch him because these guys do so much media now, way more than they ever used to do. So you can watch this play out in real time. And Ange Postecoglou would be a really good example of one guy who started as one type of personality, and now it's really eating at him, and he's now becoming a different. So you'd look forward to going to see him probably 6 months ago, and now you'd be thinking this might be a bit trickier today because now he's fighting back. Because
that's where the fun exists, though, isn't it? When they get a bit spiky,
it is for everybody watching. But if you're the person in there, I'm not that guy, right? I am not that. I work with coaches, so I feel I've got an empathy, hopefully, for the people who do what I think is an incredibly difficult job. So I try and display that empathy whenever possible. And I've had to go and in the past, I've had to do post-match interviews with people I would definitely call a mate and ask them whether they think they're about to get the bullet because of the recent set results. That is not easy to do if you genuinely think of the person who's standing in front of you as a pal. And I've been there, and I have done it, and they've answered as well. Understanding that we both had
that's the dance.
That's the dance, yeah. Understanding that we both have, it takes two to tango kind of thing in these situations. But when you go and do, as I've done in other situations, where you go and deal with managers who are known to be spiky anyway, then you walk in with an air of trepidation, hoping that everything just goes nice and smooth, but knowing that it might not. And if you've got to do a post-match with a guy who's known to be spiky and they've had a bad defeat and things are going wrong, then that is not a situation that I would go in and think, great, can't wait, this will be good, we'll get him here. I'm thinking, all right, how's this going to play out now? And because the truth is, as you've just described there, that the ones that anybody remembers are the ones where a manager says something back to you. So I had Gordon Strachan many years ago when he was manager of Southampton, very early on in the season. So, inconsequential, really, the outcome. It was that early in the season. I think it was at Ellen Road. It was a Southampton Leeds game, I think, and it ended 0-0. And Southampton, it was 3 games in, say. Southampton hadn't won a game up to that point. Hardest interview often to do is a 0-0 draw. What the hell do you talk about? So I went in and said, another point on the board going, but you must be, probably sounds like a silly question, but you must be looking for that first win soon. And he went, yeah, you're right. Silly question. And so at that point you thought, all right, okay. So
one of those.
There are 2 of us involved in this thing here, right? So if that's how you're going to be, how am I going to react to that here? And Gordon was notorious for being one of those guys.
I remember once somebody was asked which areas do you need to improve or something. He said the big green one or something. And it's one of those where you kind of go, right, yeah, good.
So, I suppose it's stepping outside the boundaries of the dance there, isn't it?
Exactly. And so he decided he wasn't going to play the game. The game is, he goes, oh yeah, but I'm sure it'll come soon because, I've seen what the lads are doing in training and actually a point away from home is not a bad point. That's the anticipation, the expectation. He would not play by those rules. So
rules of engagement torn up. Yeah.
So if you're walking in, and you'd know that with Gordon when you went to do him, and there were others like him, So then it's like, well, all bets are off here. But actually, if you make me look a clown, I actually do have the capability to do the same in return if I so desire. If you want me to give you a hard time, then I could do that, because I could actually ask you really proper questions, some might describe them as, but tough questions in this scenario. But generally, the agreement between us both here is that if you answer in a good way, I will ask in a good way, you know, and we'll help each other out. So that, yeah, it's a dance is a really good description.
Why didn't you want to watch back the 3-minute highlight package? What is it about that? Was it the outcome? Or
yeah, it's the outcome. Yeah. I've noted a number of people across the socials saying that they woke up on Sunday morning and the first thing they thought of was the game. And I am actually no different on that basis,
same.
you know.
It's had a real lasting impact on people as this game, I feel like.
Yeah.
Because we've lost other games this season. We've drawn.
Didn't lose.
You're quite right. We didn't lose. We've drawn away from home plenty of times as well. And generally speaking, you get an hour after the game. It's a bit annoying. We've not done X, Y, and Z in this game. But this one, unfortunately, the only other time it's happened this season, Sunderland, exactly the same.
As I said on the match ball, for me, it compounded it on an emotional level.
Yeah, that's the thing. It feels exactly the same, and the source of it is exactly the same. And it's impossible to not feel a sense of frustration with it, even if there's nothing. I don't think there's any indication that MESLIER isn't trying or isn't personally a nice guy, but
there needs to be an outlet for the frustration, and unfortunately, it tends to be channeled through socials and forums and things like that, and people just get furious and then feed off one another. And yeah, it's about directing it, isn't it?
Everybody knows that now. You know, I know that. So we're all kind of aware of how it works now. I think the one thing to remember in the midst of all this is that there's a 24-year-old bloke who has made an error in a game, high pressure game, where, you know, errors in his position, as people often trot out, goalkeeping mistakes tend to be more crucial. This was an unusual one. It's not something I've seen in 40 plus years of watching football. But there's still, and that's the bit that does worry me a little bit, bigger picture stuff, is there's still a nice guy, human being at the end of this. Now, you know, you pays your money, you has your say and all the rest of it. But, you know, obviously they're at a point, the club, whereby, you know, people aren't stupid. There are clever people working at the football club who will now also look at this and be talking about, you know, what do we do here now? Because the reaction of his teammates, that little clip that everybody will have seen by now, that the teammates after that's gone in, is that, you know, that's the kind of that's become the image of the day, frankly. And it should have been Tanaka's goal or celebration or whatever. That was, for me, that was a real frustration, because I thought for half an hour Leeds were fantastic in the second half. And we're sort of conjuring up chances and goals. It was actually a good game because it was an open game. They were having a good go at it as well. So it was a good game, but Leeds were cruising to a good win, as maybe had been anticipated at the outset. And then it all changed. And so the full focus becomes on not even the third goal, really, on the second goal. And the aftermath of that and the players' reaction says that they were frustrated as well, because they're all, you know, there's a bottom line with all of this, is that it's great that Leeds get promoted from a, isn't it great Leeds have been promoted perspective, but there are, as we all know, we'd be naive if we didn't say that there are lots of other factors riding on this as well.
It's livelihood, isn't it?
It's people's livelihoods. Yeah. You know, that it's the club's plans to regenerate the stadium and all those kind of things. The players, the bonuses that they would get for promotion. There's a lot on it. That's what professional sport carries with it. So yes, mistakes get made, but the implications of those mistakes are actually, you know, way bigger than me dropping a box and a carton at work and a couple of items get smashed, kind of thing. It plays out bigger. The ripples are much bigger than that. So we do have to recognise that that's the case as well. I think it's probably useful that the next game is an FA Cup tie.
Yeah.
Well, it's a perfect opportunity to play Darlow anyway without it seeming like a big deal, because I think it's likely he would have been rotated into the team anyway. And it's a good opportunity, assuming he doesn't make a catastrophic mistake to just keep him in the team. And it sort of saves face for everyone. You don't need to have... I mean, we've had the situation where Kiko Casilla was obviously a very high-profile signing and had to be dropped for MESLIER because he just kept making mistakes. We had Paul Rahubka, who had to be hauled off at half-time in a game because it was going so catastrophically. It was like he just can't be left.
But the Casilla one, the outlet there was him getting the long ban.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's where MESLIER had to come into the team. So the issue was kind of forced there in those circumstances by external events. In this instance, again, the timing allows for a transition to take place, whether it's temporary or not, without there being kind of a major hullabaloo about it. There'll be some, but it would have happened anyway. I'm pretty sure of that. So Carl Dallo would play the game against Harrogate, and if he does well, then he can play the next game, and then you've manoeuvred into a different position.
As a Wales fan, is Carl Darlow any good? You've actually seen him play this year, which is more than most of us have done.
Yeah, well, I've seen him play a couple of times for Wales, and he's played well. He was man of the match, I would have suggested, in the away game, which was a really difficult away game against Turkey, which Wales got a 0-0 draw in, which is a good result. They missed a penalty late on, but Wales played well in the game, and Darlow was really good in goal. I mean, Wales have a situation where they've got two goalkeepers, neither of whom are playing first-team football. Danny Wood actually has been playing first-team football more recently, but not entirely successfully, it has to be said, with Leicester. It's a shame because I know Danny quite well. He's a lovely fella, but that's how it plays out, isn't it? So Wales don't have a senior international goalkeeper or a senior goalkeeper who's really kind of an absolute guaranteed number one pick. So Carl actually probably is going to emerge as that thing. If he was playing for Leeds, that would definitely be the case. If he was Leeds' first pick, he becomes Wales' first pick, no question. So that there has to be an opportunity there now. I think, even from Milan's perspective, I think it would probably be better if he, that post-Sunderland, the manager was steadfast and stood by him and played him. After this one, the manager will be able to say, well, I kept you in after the last one. I could have done something then and I didn't. Whereas after this one, I can't do that now because his own judgment is kind of under scrutiny here as well now, because the expectation would be, well, he's made a big error. You should make a change. And so I think at this point, it probably suits everybody at the moment better for something different to happen.
And I suppose that 2-week gap, as you were saying, Bryn, is a useful buffer just to take the heat out of everything, just to make the immediate memory of Saturday fade a little bit, everybody calm down, something else to look at a novelty to look at in the cup game against Harrogate. Hopefully not anything other than a straightforward outcome. But it's something different. We're back at Ellen Road. We'll be talking about something different. There'll be new incidents. I mean,
there's another element to this as well, which is we're now in a transfer window, and that does give scope now for things to happen. And I think that's another possibility. You could not. I don't know because I know nothing about what's happening behind the scenes, but it's another potential sort of movement that could happen here, whereby you have the scope now for the next 4 weeks to do something about this. So that's another option available as well.
I mean, the 49ers have been very keen to stress all the data-led stuff they're going to do. It's impossible to look at the goalkeeper data and not conclude we need something better. It has cost us, well, whether you look at the data or you just will look with your eyes, it's impossible not to conclude that this is costing us points.
And actually, the two sides of that coin, the other side is what Bryn touched on. It's the human side, isn't it? It's the man management side of it, whereby Farke risks his reputation by saying, you're the best goalkeeper in the division, as he did earlier in the season. And now there is evidence to suggest that, or been a couple of major errors that suggest that's not the case. So how he responds to that and how he reacts to that is really, really interesting, isn't it? And the fact that dropping a goalkeeper, it feels bigger in many ways than rotating strikers or wingers because it's such a crucial position.
And actually, that's a good point, because if a centre-half makes a couple of obvious errors in the midst of a game that lead to goals, I mean, the likelihood is, and that they would then be dropped and somebody else would come in to replace them. It doesn't happen as readily with that goalkeeping position, because that just seems to be more significant. But if your number two is a good goalkeeper, that's what the number two goalkeeper's there for. It can't just be for injury. It must also be potentially for loss of form as well.
And there's also, I guess, a wider discussion as well, because if you then turn around and say, well, my number two isn't actually good enough to be number one, or why did you sign him? That then reflects on recruitment and squad building.
It's a slightly weird one, that role, that number two goalkeeper role, because there are sometimes other factors at play in terms of who you get to come and do that, and the reasons that you get them to come and do that. So, I mean, if you think like Scott Carson, who was at Manchester City, is he still there? I don't know.
Yeah, he was on the bench at the weekend.
That's it. So, well, how old's Scott now?
105.
That's what I thought. Yeah. I thought it was roundabout there. So, Scott is there on the basis of the fact he knows that he's almost never, ever, ever going to play. But that's okay, because there are other things clearly that he does that make him important and significant. That
being homegrown, for example,
whatever it might be, that earn him another contract. At the end of this one. So the number two goalkeeper role is a slightly strange one, but your number two goalkeeper must be ready to come in and play first team football when the need arises. So if your goalie gets sent off mid-match, he comes on, as Darlow's done previously, then he will come on and take on that role. But longer term, that must be an option as well.
Did you get a player interview post-match at the weekend?
We didn't, no.
Oh, should you have got one?
Well,
do you normally? Or?
Generally we do, yeah. It's a little bit more of a movable feast, that one, but I think, I mean, it's a tricky one. My take on this one, usually from a lot of years of doing this stuff, is send the senior pro out, send the captain out, because you would expect them to have that the understanding that is part of their role. So
and they're almost doing the same dance as the manager, I suppose, when it's your captain.
Yeah. And if when I used to work a lot on Premier League games, when I was in the tunnel doing the pre and post match stuff on Premier League matches, when the team that would won, we were allowed to ask for two players from the team that had won, assuming one had won. From the team that lost, we were also allowed to ask for two players, but the unwritten agreement was we'd ask the losing club, for one player, and I would say just send out your senior pro or your captain.
Send Luke Ayling.
Well, it would have been somebody like Luke. That's why those lads are actually, they do have a real value. Tony DeRigo used to be the guy when I was doing Radio Leeds back in the day here. If Leeds had lost a game, I'd go and head out. I'd either do Tony or Gary Speed, or later on it'd be Lucas Radebe or David Weatherall, guys I got on well with, who I knew if I asked them would say yes. So there are those, and the reason that they understand this dance as well, that you just want somebody to reflect on it, and they're the ones best placed probably to come up with a sort of a suitable message and a suitable phrasing. So post-match on Saturday would have been a time probably to send, say, Ethan out, for instance, who's a good talker.
Get Joe Rodon on the mic.
Well, Joe don't.
Straight down the tunnel, furious.
From the media perspective, that's absolutely what you would not be doing, right? You would not send that Joe out, because you could tell that the outcome was unpredictable, shall we say. And what you don't want from the media perspective is unpredictable outcome. You want predictability of outcome, because that suggests to you that it's okay, it's safe, if you like. Listen, these are the kind of the rules of engagement here. So you would send out what would deem to be a safe pair of hands. And so we're never really, I mean, you're picking the bones over something that you don't necessarily want to, we had the whole drive back. Luckily, it was only an hour 15 or whatever from Hull to kind of sit and quietly mull over what we'd just witnessed and not have anything really to say about it, frankly.
There's a joke about whether you send out a safe pair of hands and whether you not send
I've set you
MESLIER
up with that
and
one,
all that. But,
an absolute open goal, that one.
We don't need to go.
It's interesting, we were talking for all that time there, and it's fascinating to get a little peek behind the curtain like that. And we came onto the transfer window, and I went, oh, bloody hell, yeah, the transfer window's open. And that's another opportunity for the club to move the narrative on.
Yep.
Is to do something.
Yep.
Just do something, or, maybe, I don't know, in the dark arts lexicon, do you let a little story slip out to move the narrative along?
Well, I've had it in the past with agents who'd contact me and say X is wanting to move. I've had clubs never. I'm sure clubs do it, but I don't think Leeds are one of those clubs. I don't get that sense. There isn't much transfer spec around Leeds.
Bamford to Wrexham. That's one that has done the rounds.
Yeah.
But then Patrick was out with an injury, wasn't he, on Saturday?
Surely not.
I don't think, if I was being asked pure speculation, I don't think that would happen. Don't think that would work. But anyway, you've taken me down a diversionary route there.
Stealth attack, that one.
Yeah, got me. But there is you can have a discussion, a debate around something now which takes eyes in a different direction. And I think there's probably a valid discussion and debate to be had around where Leeds United are at currently.
Especially when you say, well, Burnley, I mean, it's Ashley Barnes, and we all know what the Ellen Road crowd thought of Ashley Barnes in the second leg of the playoff semi-final. But he's gone to Burnley, so they've made moves. It looks like Ben Brereton Diaz is going on loan from Southampton to Sheffield United. So both clubs there.
Well, then that raises an expectation amongst your own fan base that you reciprocate and respond.
Because, well, the fear, Bryn, is that, as we've heard before, Angus Kinnear often trots out the line that January is a difficult time to do business, and we don't want to disrupt the squad, and you get it from the manager as well. It's a story we've heard, it's a narrative we've heard pushed out a lot before. I don't for one second think they're not looking at what opportunities they've got behind the scenes, but the regular narrative is being pushed out, and I think it instills fear in Leeds fans because we've seen how these things can unravel in seasons past, such as last season, for example. Yeah,
I mean, I think there is scope for Leeds to do a little bit here. Whether they will or not, I'll return you to my earlier, I don't know is genuinely the case, but I think there is scope to do something here. I mean, even if you look at something that others have mentioned where Ipswich went in last season and brought in Kiefer Moore, for instance, who proved a useful foil in various scenarios whereby maybe plan A wasn't working, for instance. So just that, the availability of somebody who can do something a bit different. I mean, there's another story from, Saturday's game. The manager mentioned in the post-match interview, we could have had 4, 5 or 6. And he's actually probably right, because although Leeds did well to score 3 away from home, they could have had 6 or 7 away from home if all the chances created had been taken. That's another narrative that's been there throughout the course of this season. So goals scored to chances created, there's a gap there. I don't know what the XG is. I don't even really understand what XG is. But anyway, even perception will tell you, or the visuals will tell you, they create loads of chances and don't necessarily take as many as they should. So there is scope potentially for finding the person who will add that element. And there's a suspicion that if you add that element, then everything becomes a little bit easier, because we've had this conversation in this room previously this season. I think the sense we still have here, and I'm holding on to this, is that Leeds are the best team in the division. Now, the table tells us that, but I don't think the table tells us the full story, because I think Leeds are clearly the best team in the division. The table doesn't tell us that currently. So what you want to try and do to impact most positively is to make that be the case. So what do we need to do here to ensure that is the case? That
it's about realising potential, isn't it? Because statistically, we are an outlier, like in terms of performance and the chances that we create and the ones that we concede.
Yeah.
Yet we're really close.
Yeah, so there are two things there. The two elements to this, that if you make tweaks in both, or maybe a bit more than tweaks in both, then this thing should be fine. It should be. So we have a sense
all good enough.
Good enough, and it only needs to be good enough, frankly. At the end of the season, 1 point or 11 points doesn't make any difference. If you win the league, you win the league. But still, it's the approach to that is causing the concern. After the game at the weekend was not just the fact that 2 goals had been conceded late on in a game that Leeds quite clearly were going to win, but also that the other 2 teams who you suspect still are going to provide the toughest challenge both won really well away from home at places that Leeds didn't manage. Leeds got beaten at Blackburn. And then Burnley have gone there and won. And Sheffield United, who've got loads of players out injured and all the rest of it, went and won at Watford, who've been, up until the Cardiff game, had been sort of impeccable at home pretty much. So The other two are still in the frame here, and
and are reinforcing.
Yes, and so what you've got to do, anybody planning strategy here as at the football club must be looking and saying, right, well, we have to stay at least where we are now, if not push on further. So how do we do that? That has to be the conversation. And if somebody says, well, we need to improve at one end and at the other end, then we should be looking to do those things.
It's just going to be Farke ringing Buendia twice a day, isn't it?
Well, just more missed calls.
I mean, I don't imagine the manager really gets too much involved. He's involved in the discussions, obviously he is, but then the idea is there's a team of people who go about, create, and Leeds recruitment, we've discussed that here as well, I think it's been pretty solid. There's been too many misses, and it's a tough old gig, the recruitment bit, because if you look down the list of players signed previously at Leeds, it's probably actually, there were one or two high profile successes, but it's actually probably more miss than hit. But I think they've done a good job with the recruitment with this group, smallish group, but I think there's quality in there, and they're covering quite well because they're getting loads of injuries as well along the way. But there still might be more that is required to just guarantee the outcome. You want to do everything you can, guarantee the outcome. I'm looking at Wrexham. People get bored with me talking about Wrexham with these things, but just as a little comparison, and there is still an ongoing comparison to be made there. In terms of the way the season is playing out, very much so. But Wrexham at the moment lack a striker.
Pat Bamford.
Well, that's where all that speculation.
5 million.
Joe Gelhardt's name has been mentioned as well. But basically, anybody with a Championship club has been mentioned because the expectation at Wrexham is that you're going to see that they are going to spend a significant amount of money in acquiring a new striker, because the area that's clearly been identified that they're having a problem with at the moment is scoring goals. It's not conceding them, it's scoring them. So they will go and do something about that, because they're in a position, Wrexham, currently where they are very much in the fight for automatic promotion.
I've just looked at the table and it made me anxious on your behalf.
Well,
that's what Leeds have done to me.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's so the pressures are the same, right? The expectation levels are lower because it's a lower down league and it's a smaller fan base, but the pressure is kind of the same. And the sense at Wrexham is that they will go and spend, because we are now in that position at Wrexham whereby they have done that previously, and you'd think, Birmingham spent 15 million quid on a striker in the summer. Wrexham aren't going to spend anything like that, but it is setting
There's a documentary about it, so they've set their own expectations, haven't they?
There's an expectation set about where you need to pitch it to make sure that you're as close as you can get to them. So Leeds are involved in a similar kind of situation here, in terms of what your competitors are now, what they look like, what they're capable of doing. So you've now got to push on to make sure that you end up in the place that you want to be. You've got to do what you need to do to get to that place.
25 days to address it. Let's see what they do, shall we? Cheers, Bryn.
You're welcome, as ever.
Do it again soon. Probably should we do it after the transfer window's closed, and then we can see if any of this had any merit whatsoever.
Probably better not.
We'll speak soon. Cheers, Bryn.
The Square Ball Podcast.